So you've got a fractured political right, a rising left, and now a really controversial proposal to unite two longtime rivals. We're going to break down a recent discussion on Sky News Australia that called for the Liberal/National Coalition to team up with One Nation. The big questions are, could it actually work, and what would be the cost? All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we need to understand the problem they're trying to solve, this fractured conservative landscape. Then we'll get into the proposed solution, this so-called glorious coalition. After that, we'll look at how they might bridge their huge differences, using the net zero debate as a perfect case study. And finally, we'll break down a specific policy they could potentially get behind. Okay, so first things first, what is the actual problem that this whole coalition idea is even trying to solve? Well, according to the people pushing for it, it all comes down to one thing, a conservative vote that they see as just dangerously divided. And right off the bat, you've got a massive hurdle, and that hurdle has a name, Pauline Hanson. Look, she's open to the idea of supporting a coalition government with confidence in supply, voting to keep them in power on the big bills, but she makes it absolutely crystal clear that no one is going to tell her what to do. That fiercely independent streak, that's a huge, immediate challenge for any kind of formal alliance. This really lays out the political stakes. The whole argument being made is that when center-right voters split their support between the coalition and parties like One Nation, it just fractures the vote. And from their perspective, that division is basically a gift-wrapped present for the Labour Party, helping them not only win, but really dig in and consolidate power. And listen, this isn't just some abstract theory. You've got Liberal Senator Leah Blyth calling this split catastrophic. She points right to her home state of South Australia, where she argues this exact thing led directly to a super-majority Labour government. So for the people who support this idea, uniting isn't just strategic, it's about survival. So if a divided vote is the disease, what's the proposed cure? Well, they're calling it the glorious coalition. This term was actually coined by the Sky News host, and the idea is pretty simple, really. It's about building an alliance that brings that entire center-right vote under one big umbrella. Now, it might be less formal than the traditional liberal-national partnership we're all used to, but the goal? It's exactly the same. Create a voting bloc that's powerful enough to actually form a government. When you boil it all down, the strategy is this. You've got to bring a key player, One Nation, inside the tent, to use that old saying. The core belief here is that competing against each other for the same pool of voters is just a losing game. For them, cooperation is the only viable path back to power. But how can parties that disagree on so much, so fundamentally, actually work together? Well, proponents of this whole deal argue that the blueprint for how to do it, it already exists, and it's on the other side of the political aisle. And let's be totally clear about the biggest hurdle here. It's policy. The Liberal Party is officially committed to the Paris Agreement, but then you have figures like Pauline Hanson and even some within the coalition like Senator Blyth who are staunchly opposed. This isn't some minor squabble, it's a fundamental ideological canyon. Senator Blyth argues they should just look to their opponents for the playbook. She points to the Labour and Greens alliance and says, look, those guys fundamentally disagree on a ton of stuff, but they still manage to act as reliable partners in Parliament to get their shared goal, which is holding power. It's a really pragmatic agree-to-disagree model. To really understand just how deep this ideological divide runs, let's zoom in on what was mentioned as the single biggest point of contention, the whole debate over net zero. Senator Blyth's position here is completely uncompromising. She frames net zero not as a policy goal, but as a lie that's designed to make Australians poor. You see, this kind of stark language changes the debate from a simple disagreement over policy to what she sees as a fight against a destructive ideology. And to really anchor her argument, she points to this key statistic, that 91% of Australia's energy still comes from fossil fuels. From her perspective, this makes the entire green energy transition seem, not just difficult, but fundamentally impractical and, frankly, dishonest. She then connects this policy directly to a whole list of real-world consequences. She argues it threatens everything from the fertilizer on our farms to the trucks delivering our food, essentially painting a picture of a nation's supply chain grinding to a halt, all because of its climate commitments. So her conclusion is really simple. The current problems with fuel and the supply chain are no accident. In her view, they are the direct and totally predictable outcome of a deliberate policy choice to go after net zero. Okay, so from this deep critique of net zero, the conversation pivots. It moves to a very specific and immediate policy proposal that's designed to fix one of its claimed consequences: high fuel prices. The short-term plan they've proposed has three parts. First, a cut to the fuel excise, which would save drivers money at the pump. Second, a temporary reduction in the road user tax to help out the transport industry. And third, a very, very specific way to pay for it all. And here's how they tie it all back to their core argument. They propose paying for these tax cuts by canceling offsets for electric vehicles and green hydrogen. Now, this makes the plan budget neutral, sure, but just as importantly, it acts as a direct policy rejection of the very green initiatives they're so opposed to. And all of that leaves us with the question at the very heart of this entire debate. For Australia's centre-right, what's the ultimate calculation? Is holding fast to your ideological principles worth sacrificing power? Or is the chance to actually govern worth the inevitable compromise?